Hi, my name is Stephen Mulick, and I am your child's chemistry teacher this year. If your child is taking one of these three course codes for Regents Chemistry, then you're in the right place if the name and the code match. I wanted to record a brief video to get some common information and common questions uh, answered and given ahead of parent-teacher conferences to make our meeting as efficient as it can be. So let me start off by saying these are the skills that I hope to develop with your student over the course of the year, your child. Obviously, on top of all this is also a healthy understanding and hopefully appreciation for chemistry, atoms, molecules, and ions, how they interact, how they change, and how that gets measured. I like to usually say that a firm understanding of introductory chemistry is really helpful in real life. Anywhere from like why we salt the roads when it snows outside to what to do if the battery in your laptop has a failure in its casing, which that's happened to me before, and that wasn't pleasant, but I was glad I didn't put any water on it. A little bit about how class runs. Unlike most years at Bronx Science, I'm trying to flip my classroom, if you're familiar with the term. Usually, a lot of the learning and discovery takes place in class, and the discovery and learning of certain foundational baseline skills and the content of chemistry. This is what I've done. This is my 11th year at Bronx Science. This is what I've done for the last 10 years. But given the nature of how we're learning this year and how class is running, I wanted to experiment with a flipped classroom, which some teachers at other schools have been very successful with. And I worked with some of my colleagues to help develop this idea where the synchronous portion of class is going to be very group focused and problem set focused and extension and understanding focused, the higher level thought processes. We meet through Zoom. It's the same link for each class every day. I do encourage students to download the app and log in with their either Bronx Science email or their DOE email, because if you download the desktop version, like the app, you get more permissions, you get more functionality out of the Zoom platform. And by logging in with your school or DOE email, it actually helps me make breakout rooms automatically, which gets the students into class and into their working mode more efficiently. After they get a chance to work in their breakout rooms, which is, I wrote this somewhere, 3 to 5 students, they come back and we go over the problems they worked on. I answer any questions. I probe some students for understanding checks. Then that night when they go home, or that afternoon, or when class ends, they have a 10 to 15 minute video that I upload through YouTube and then post through Edpuzzle. The students watch the video, they take notes on what they're learning, and then they submit that to me through Classroom. That's most days. Some of the other days when we're doing a lab, the students might be finishing up the lab that they started in class with their group. The idea is that asynchronous work, when they're engaging with an Edpuzzle video, builds up to the next day. So instead of it being class where you learn something and then go home and do homework to practice, it's more like class is a review of what we were supposed to have learned yesterday. Of course, if your child is not keeping up to date with the videos, that will make a much more difficult and less positive learning environment. So it is really important to make sure that there is that asynchronous time carved out for chemistry every day to make sure that the maximum amount of learning takes place at home. A little bit more about how class runs, the synchronous portion. I want to really emphasize active participation. There it is, 3 to 5 students in the breakout rooms. That's the bulk of the time that we're in class. I am outside of all the breakout rooms, and I can pop into one to check on people, or if anyone needs me, they call me for help and I can come to them. You can imagine this being like having groups of desks in a classroom and the teacher is circulating. Obviously, the teacher doesn't hear every word that's said, and the most important work is happening in those groups. And much the same way, that's how I wanted to structure our class, where we're solidifying the information from yesterday. We're expanding upon it. We are hoping it to build on it and move forward in the curriculum. I use a platform called Pear Deck. If you are familiar, it's wonderful. If you're not, the idea is that the students can work through problems. It's written in the PowerPoint presentation, essentially. And the students can write answers or pick multiple choice or type out an answer or draw. And so this is nice where I can see all of the class's answers at once. I can jump into a breakout room when I see trouble, or I know who I need to call on to either get a really solid answer or maybe someone who might need a little bit more help. That's my job as a teacher. For your child, the best way he or she or they can participate in class actively is to make the most positive use of that breakout room. Making sure they can see each other and hear each other really builds the idea of a community, which is very important given the platform and the nature of the interaction. So I always advocate that students have cameras on, microphones on, and are ready to ask and answer questions of each other and to check in with each other. The idea with these pair decks is that they can progress at their own pace, but when they progress at the pace of their breakout room, it really makes sure that everyone in the room understands what is going on in class, that they're making sure that anyone who has any questions, they get answered, or they have an opportunity to get their own questions answered. A little bit about how the grading policy works. You can see it's on the left there. It's all written out how frequently everything happens. The things I want to spend the most time on, I just talked about: engagement, participation, the notes. There is a weekly homework assignment. I try and make sure that it's weekly, maybe a little less when there's a project or a lab due. But those are graded based on correctness, largely with a little bit of bump for completion. So that's important to really make sure that those are thoughtfully answered, and I give them out on Monday. They're due the following Monday, so there's a full week to engage with that. The lab reports, they happen about once every 1 to 2 weeks, but we'll start them synchronously and finish them asynchronously. We are doing labs because there is still a lab requirement on the part of the state, because as of now, the Regents is still happening and we have to be prepared for it. What determines what is qualified as a lab is a very broad term. It's a very broad net that we're casting. So most of these are web-based or simulation-based, or maybe there's a video of data being collected where the students can do that. At home, take that data and process it. There may be a couple of opportunities later in the year where we try and do some chemistry at home, but really just owing to the fact that even access to a scale is not necessarily guaranteed. Not that no one has scales, but I don't really want to put students in a position of having to go shopping to do a chemistry lab. It would be nice if I could provide the materials, but of course I can't. So that's at least how we're operating for now. And then assessments, we're having projects or activities. It seems about 2 per marking period. But the thing I really want to emphasize most about the grading policy is that because of how we've changed how school runs, we used to have a 7-period week, and now we have a 5, where 2 of those 7 periods were just 90 minutes devoted to a lab. But now, since we have a lot less time, but the same amount of work to do, it really shows that we're going to have fewer assignments, and they're going to have to maybe have some weird gaps or overlaps in how the assignments align with the curriculum. But the point I'm trying to make is that with less time, really every moment of class is important. So being on time and active and engaging is important, but also completing all the work, because there aren't as many assignments, and therefore everything's going to count slightly more when everything gets totaled up at the end of the year. Specifically about assessments, since we're shifting away from the individual test that you're going to take in a 40-minute period to something more of a project or an activity, I've noticed already that a lot of students it is a growth, it is an adjustment, but the necessity to collaborate and to communicate and to not procrastinate is that much more important. Obviously, in other courses, there were a lot more projects already, so your child may have experience with projects, but not in a chemistry lens, through a chemistry lens. So the idea is that I will be trying to make some synchronous or asynchronous time to work on projects and to coordinate, but at the end of the day, the work may need to be done largely outside of class, in addition to us progressing through the content. I'm happy to talk about those projects when we actually do meet. I'm not going to go into a full rundown of everything. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, I'm sure, one of the most common questions I'm going to hear. How can my child improve their grade? What can my son do to be better? What can my daughter do to get a higher grade in this course? Really, I want to say the number one thing you can do as a parent is check the grades yourself and talk to your child about his or her or their grades. Because communication really is where everything comes from. The more your child can tell you about what is going on in chemistry class, the better. In fact, I would always suggest have them teach you, because you really need to understand something to be able to teach it, in my experience. But in terms of the actual individual numbers, look at where the grade is coming from. It's broken down at the bottom of the pupil path grade book. If it's coming from engagement, that's the stuff that's submitted every day. And so check those assignments. Are they getting submitted on time every day? If they're not, they need to be, and that will cause the grade to go up over time. For the lab reports, it's largely the same. There needs to be a step where there might need to be coordination with the lab group to make sure they're meeting to discuss, to make sure the lab report gets done. For the assessments, even though they're done somewhat outside of class, I do try and make sure there is a detailed rubric and at least a week to complete all projects. And I hold office hours daily for students who need to stop by and get a little bit more directed help. I'm always happy to answer questions. They can schedule it or they can just pop in. I try to be as flexible as I can be to make sure that your child has the most positive experience possible. Thanks for watching, and if you have any further questions, I look forward to meeting you soon.